Welcome to the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Public Scoping Meeting. I'm Brad Barth with the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. I'm the Sediment Diversion Program Manager. I'm also in the Operations Group with CPRA. I'm the Operations Assistant Administrator. Thank you for coming today. Real quick, we'll go over an introduction. We'll talk a little bit about our coast, our land loss. We'll talk about addressing the root cause for reconnecting our river, which will lead us into talking about the Mid-Breton sediment diversion. And then lastly, we'll hit upon and talk a little bit about our operations and adaptive management. So who is CPRA? Post-2005, Hurricane Katrina, the legislator looked at how the state was implementing coastal restoration and coastal protection, and combined us into one group or one agency to do an integrated approach to handling restoration and protection efforts, leading to the creation of Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. So you may be familiar with this map, may have seen it before. Since 1932, it's over 80 years of actual data that we've observed from USGS of land loss over 2,000 square miles. When we look at going forward over the next 50 years, if you're familiar with the Coastal Master Plan, you're familiar with, we look at a couple different sea level rise scenarios. This would be the medium scenario. Potentially, we're on order of 4,200 square miles that we have the potential to lose over the next 50 years should we do nothing. So what's at stake here? When we look at coastal Louisiana, what's at stake is our flood protection, our natural processes of the lower coast of Louisiana, our coastal habitats, our cultural heritage, and our working coast are at stake. Our Coastal Master Plan is required by the legislator every 6 years. It's a $50 billion plan. It's equally split between restoration and protection or risk reduction, $25 billion to each. It is required for us to look at this every 6 years, and really what this is, it's really how we rank and select projects for implementation every 6 years. It gives us the ability to put the best projects on the landscape, considering the information, science, and analysis available to rank projects. That's really what it is. We don't have $50 billion, but this gives us a pool of projects to select from to put the best projects on the ground with changing environmental conditions. Our root cause. Early 1900s, we were really in the process of completing the lower Mississippi River protection system. Great feat in terms of protecting our nation, our citizens, and our navigation interests in terms of economics of the entire United States. But what that's done is left a lot of areas that don't have that access to the fresh water, the sediment, and the nutrients. And that's really been starving those areas and leading those areas into a degrading nature or degrading wetland environment. When we look at some imagery across coastal Louisiana, we can look to our neighbors to the west in the Atchafalaya-Wax Lake Delta area. One of the only areas in coastal Louisiana that is experiencing land gain, no land loss in these areas. And these areas have that direct access to fresh water, sediment, and nutrients all combined together. If we go look at areas further to the east, our Breton Sound Basin, we don't have that same access to the fresh water, sediment, and nutrients. And that's why you look at this, you can see the blue for the Wax Lake Atchafalaya, I call that the happy face. You look at the Breton Sound side, the frowny face. So let's talk a little bit more specifically why you're here today for the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project. Some basic details. River mile locations at 68 on the Mississippi River on the east or the left descending bank, Wills Point, Bertrandville area. The funding is through NIFWIF, oil spill dollars, TAS, currently that are being worked on right now are the engineering, design, and permitting tasks associated with this permit application, and thus why you're attending and watching this very scoping meeting. Some of the details of this project, we'll be looking to have an inlet along the river in the -20 to -35 foot elevation range. The overall corridor width for permanent construction features is approximately 1,400 feet wide, approximately half a mile long. The capacity for the diversion is estimated up to 75,000 CFS. So it's a passive system, so it relies on the water level of the river and the water level of the basin to send the water, the nutrients, and the sediment out into the basin. So at low river flow in the beginning of the spring flood season, the diversion may only be able to flow on order of 30 or 40,000 CFS. As it approaches max flood stage and reaches a million plus on the flow of the river, we'll be up closer to the 75,000 CFS and how it operates. Base flow up to 5,000 CFS is what we're asking for in the permit. With that, we know base flow is a more of an environmental condition out in the future. We really only want to flow what makes sense environmentally going forward into the future based on conditions at the time that we're operating. Major components and features of the project will consist of an inlet, a conveyance structure, and an outlet. It'll require us to do some interior drainage modifications to maintain drainage within the interior in the Bertrandville-Wills Point area, and then also require us to relocate Highway 23. This slide kind of gives you a footprint of the project area. The main footprint includes temporary and permanent right-of-ways. At this point, that's in very infancy of the engineering and design process, but this gives you an idea of perspective of the footprint of the project in terms of both temporary and permanent features. The lower blue dot down to the right would be the pump station, where we're looking at some potential improvements to the pump station for that interior drainage. When we look at sediment diversions, what's the goal here? Really the goal is selecting a location along the river that's got a super concentrated amount of sediment, obviously from deposition onto a point bar. And when we can use that material and concentrate that material off that point bar, then we can maximize that sediment diverted out into the basin and minimize that fresh water. Looking at over project operations, this is a 3D rendition. Obviously the project is on the east bank or the left descending bank. You can see here the flow through the intake into the gated structure and then out into the Breton Sound Basin. Looking at plan view, you can see a little bit more detail here with permanent features and then potential temporary areas for construction laydown or staging areas. Again, major features are intake channel, the gate structure, LA 39 relocation, the channel conveyance, and then out to the outfall area with a pilot channel out to River Ashen or Oak River. Again, another 3D rendition here. Looking at, you can see from kind of the bottom left to the top right, the Mississippi River levee, our inlet channel, the gate structure. So this is a controlled gated facility. So when we're not operating, the gates would obviously be closed. Channel conveyance out to the outfall area and then out into the basin. Kind of looking north-south here, looking at the gate complex and the inlet and conveyance channels with the guide levees. So let's talk a little bit about operations. So as part of this permit, an initial operations plan is included such that the Corps can evaluate this project. Our trigger for the on-off or the start and stop of the diversion is 450,000 CFS at Belle Chase. That also includes up to 5,000 CFS base flow when we're below that 450,000 CFS. That base flow is for future changing environmental conditions. And again, it's an up to number. We would expect the base flow to only operate and flow at a level needed based on the future operational conditions or environmental conditions we see in the basin. We expect that to be lower than the 5,000. Adaptive management plan. So this is a key part of dealing with environmental changes in the future, and really gets at the heart of our mission, is to be able to consider our changing environment and be able to manage at or below those levels stated above based on the conditions we see. Additional emergency stops, tropical activity, spills, and navigation. As part of our charge as CPRA is flood protection. We don't want to have conflicting messages there in terms of flood protection. So no desire or intention to have this thing operating during a tropical storm or a hurricane, and thus we'll have a plan in place to close the gates during any kind of hurricane or tropical storm activity. Adaptive management. Again, really, this is all the information, all our real-time monitoring and information that's gathered for anything from looking at the performance of our project to providing us data and information on our changing environment, which will allow us to make operational changes as needed based on our permit conditions. So some of the things that we may be looking at are sediment load, the flow in the river, salinity in the basin, the stage in the river, and other water quality parameters and such. As we go forward in this permitting process, CPRA will continue to have some boats out in the river on a regular basis to do some river sediment sampling, to continue to gather the information necessary for us to have an efficient design in terms of understanding the hydrology, the hydraulics, and the sediment transport, so we can maximize that sediment capture. So site-specific data and information leading into our effort there. We'll continue into the 30% design effort. That 30% design effort will then directly support the permitting process and provide the necessary information to the public in terms of what the project looks like, the features of the project, the components of the project, such that the Corps can assess those things based on this public scoping meeting and your input. Physical model testing is part of that hydrology and hydraulic testing. One of the things we want to do is also have a physical scale model of the project as well, so that way we can look at both numerical and physical modeling and be able to have input there in terms of getting the best design. And that way it's also tested as well, and not some type of experiment. We've already done that physical scale model testing. And then obviously we'll continue for our outreach and engagement, where we try to put as much information that we can and maintain that transparency of information that we have and where we're at in the process of the project. And I appreciate your time today. Thank you.